Hi guys, today I'm going to talk about three key and important concepts that I learned from this course. One of them is employee discipline. While self-discipline is one of the best ways to handle that, not everyone is capable of doing so. So then in that case, then the organization needs to step up and have their own form of discipline. One of the forms is positive enforcement. With positive enforcement, what they do is the manager hopes to positively help change behaviors of employees. So if they're doing something wrong, then they'll try to correct that situation and try to have it be a positive approach. Sometimes that doesn't work for people. And so then instead of doing a positive approach, they have to do a progressive approach. And with progressive, people usually get like a verbal warning. And if that doesn't work for them, then the next step would be to have a written warning, letting them know what they're doing wrong. If they still haven't changed their behavior at that point, then they will usually receive some sort of suspension. And if that doesn't work, then it's going to lead to termination. Now, no matter what you're doing, if you're unable to accept any of these forms of discipline and it's become an issue and the employer has tried to resolve it, then at that point it can lead to termination, which means that the person would lose their job. So whether they're using a positive or progressive approach, or if someone's able to self-discipline, they could still lose their job if they're unable to figure it out and correct their behavior. The next key concept I want to talk about is the Fair Labor Standard Act, which set three key responsibilities of employers. So for one, it has child labor laws, which is huge because it's important for an employer to understand who they're able to hire, at what age they're able to hire them, and if there's any limitations to hiring them. So usually a hazardous job, the child would have to be 18 or older in order to perform those duties. There are other exceptions. So like if a child is 15 years old and still going to school, if the job can work around their school hours and on a limited basis, they would be able to work. But generally 16 and older is about where it's at for children to have jobs. The Fair Labor Standard Act also requires employers to pay overtime to non-exempt employees. Now, there are exemptions and they are laid out in the textbook. There are 5 main exemptions. So generally these people have to be of a certain, so they need to be like an admin, manager, something like that, where they are making salary. They're required to make at least $455 a week to be exempt from having to be paid overtime. There's quite a lot that goes with that. There are a lot of standards to try to distinguish between who is and who is not exempt. But in general, the person would have to hold like a managerial or some sort of like executive or professional type of job in order to be non-exempt. They still would have to be paid pretty well to not get paid the time and a half overtime and to be considered exempt. So the difference between that is that people who are non-exempt are expected to be paid time and a half if they work over 40 hours. Now, there are some special cases such as farm workers or different schedules. So people that operate 24/7, like a hospital, would run off a special standardized week. So the final thing that the Fair Standards Act implemented was minimum wage. So there is a federal set minimum wage that is required to be paid to all employees, but there is also a state set minimum wage. So if the state actually pays more than the federal set minimum wage, then it's expected to be paid at the state amount. And the reason why we need minimum wage is so that people have a standard and they're able to at least meet the cost of living in these areas. People are expected to be paid at least that. Generally, that'll be, an entry-level job. Someone may be coming straight out of high school, or and depending on skill set, different abilities, different training, different education, then they would probably expect to be paid more than minimum wage. But it wouldn't be appropriate for an employer to pay any less. The final key concept I'd like to talk about is compensation system motivation theories. And so one of the theories is expectancy theory. And with that, employees are motivated by rewards that they actually value. If they do not value these rewards, they're not going to be motivated to do their job or to try to perform better. And you can actually make them go backwards and not be motivated if you offer some sort of reward or value and it takes time. So between the time that they actually complete the task and the time that you actually give out the reward, it could actually make them go down in motivation. So you definitely, if you're offering a value or a reward to somebody, you want to make sure that you're giving it to them as you promised. If you don't do that, then they will be likely to lower their motivation, and then if you offer something again to try to motivate them, they might not be as willing to accept that. The other theory is the equity theory, and with the equity theory, employees expect to have fairness and they want to be compensated for it. So like if they're going to compare their job or their skills to other people. So if you have one person that is motivated, that has the knowledge, the skills, that are very loyal, that have good time management, that they're putting in a lot of effort and skill, and they're getting paid the same as someone who doesn't try as hard, isn't as motivated, isn't as good at doing the job, or lacks the skills, or isn't really going anywhere with the job. So maybe they started first, but they just kind of leveled out and they're not doing anything above and beyond or offering any extra effort. It's going to make the motivated employee be less motivated, and they're going to adjust their inputs. So their inputs are those that I just discussed, like the loyalty, the effort, the skills, the training, the education. They're not going to try as hard. They're going to lower everything that they're putting into it, because if they're going to get paid the same, why work harder? And then the outputs that they want would be job security, recognition, praise, anything like that. And if they feel that they're not getting any of the outputs out of it, again, they're going to adjust. They're not going to work as hard. They want to be treated fairly. And if they're not, then they're going to change the way that they see everything and the way that they do the job. Summary, as an employer, it's important for me, and these are my favorite 3 concepts I learned from the class, understanding the Fair Standards Labor Act, understanding how employees are motivated. So when you're doing the compensation system motivation theories, and understanding, how people react to different things. So how they're motivated, how they feel they're rewarded, how they feel appreciated, as well as understanding discipline and how it works and how different people can react to discipline. Sometimes positive enforcement is important in the workplace, especially if you're trying to keep morale up. But it doesn't always work, and it's only some places can use it, whereas others can't. So, if you're in a hazardous job, if you're a doctor, they're not going to let you make mistakes. They're going to have serious consequences if you do, because that could be the result of someone losing their life. So, something simple that could have been just somebody keeps just doing something incorrectly, that's just a simple fix. They can positively try to motivate them so that they don't feel that the discipline is really harsh for that situation. Sometimes people just don't do well with being penalized. Sometimes they work harder or they try harder, or, when they're training and learning something and then you have to switch it up on them and they're doing something completely different. It might be good to have some positive discipline. So just depending on the person, and being an employer in general, you want to be able to relate with your workers and motivate them the best way that you can, as well as give them the praise that they deserve and make sure that they feel that they are wanted, that they are doing a good job at what they do and that you appreciate their efforts. As well as you have to abide by the laws set forth, like the Fair Standards Act, that allows people to be paid properly to get their overtime when needed. Another thing that they also implemented was training. You know, you have to pay for people to have training. You have to pay for people when they're on the job and they're traveling, things like that. Which, if we didn't have a standard for that, then not everyone would know how to handle those things. So, to me, all of these are really important concepts that I learned, and I'm so grateful that I learned them. It'll help me in the future as I move on with hiring or different careers or however I decide to go in life. I feel like it's all good life lessons that I will take with me. Thank you for listening.